I get it. You're stuck in pain, unable to do the sports that you love, despite trying everything that you can think of. You've seen the doctors, the physios, you've had the scans, you've done the rehab, you've even done all the exercises that you found on YouTube and Instagram, and nothing is working. And I get how frustrating that is. Seeing other people get better with the exact same rehab plan that's done nothing to help you. Seeing other people get injured and then get back to sport in a matter of weeks or months, all while you're stuck on the sidelines. And I can understand how scary and worrying that is, thinking if nothing is working, are you ever going to get over this problem? Or are you just going to be stuck with this pain forever? But in this video, we are going to break down this problem together, and I'm going to show you that there is a path back to pain-free sport, despite every other path you've taken so far leading to a dead end. Because there is one simple truth. Pain is always there for a reason. It always has a solution. The problem is, no one's looked at your pain in the right way to be able to figure out what that solution is. Until now. Now, there's absolutely loads that I want to talk about in this video, and to make sure that I get all of it in, there are certain topics that I'm not going to dive into too much detail about. But if there's something that you want to know in more depth, then just let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to circle back to it in a future video. Okay, let's dive in. The first thing that we're going to discuss is the biggest mistake that I see our medical system making day in and day out, that is overlooking the reason for your pain and keeping you stuck on the sidelines. We need to figure out if it's what you need to address in order to go from where you are now, in pain, where nothing is working, to going back to the sport that you love, moving fluidly and training fiercely. But before we dive into it, I do have a bit of a warning. Everything that we're going to talk about in this video is science-backed and evidence-based, but that doesn't stop it from being an emotional topic. Everyone watching this video will have their own relationship with pain. That means that everyone's coming into this video with their own natural biases. And I'm no exception. For years, I had my own biases when it came to pain, just because all of the education I had as a physio. But to get the absolute most out of this video, we need to try and put those biases aside and think like a scientist. A scientist takes active steps to avoid bias. They focus on the data and the evidence, and they actually get excited when they prove themselves wrong, because it means that they're getting one step closer to the truth. That's the kind of mindset that we need to understand and overcome this problem. We've got to be open and curious to explore every possible avenue, because if not, and we're deciding to shut ourselves off from possibilities, then there's a chance that we are never going to find the right solution. We need to consider everything, listen to the evidence, listen to the data, and then make a calculated, rational decision. Because as I said before, pain is always there for a reason. The very first thing we need to do is figure out what that reason is. Think of it a little bit like a domino effect. Pain is the very end of the domino effect. It's the final thing to occur. We need to figure out what that first domino is. And this is what everyone talks about when they refer to getting to the root cause. So what could that first domino possibly be? What are all of our options? Well, in truth, as human beings, when it comes to pain, there are only 4. Look, I know that sounds dumb. There are obviously loads of reasons that we can experience pain, but at its most macro, zoomed out level, it all comes down to 4 categories, and we're going to walk through them together. The first is medical pain. We can experience pain that's a symptom of a medical problem or an illness. An example of this would be someone having a heart attack. When you're having a heart attack, you experience chest pain. That pain is there as a symptom of the medical problem. It's doing exactly what pain is designed to do. It's designed to tell you when something is wrong. The next example is damage pain. This could be if you break a bone, tear a muscle, sprain a ligament, anything where you have suffered an injury to the tissue of the body, you will experience pain. And again, this is a good thing. It tells you something you need to know in order to take action. Without this pain, you'd keep running around on sprained ankles and broken legs, which is ultimately a problem. It's just causing more damage. So again, this type of pain is all about protecting us. The third example is mechanical pain. Now, this is pain that's coming from our physical body, but not as the result of damage. The image here is of a guy training in the gym, and anyone will know that if they're taking December off of any form of exercise, I know because my birthday's in December, and with Christmas and work stuff, I often have a very, very lazy December. But what that means is when I get back into my training routine in January, I experience pain. I haven't damaged my body, but I've asked it to do something that it's not used to. It wasn't prepared for. My other favorite example of this is someone building flat pack furniture. Now, if you've done this recently, you will realize that after about 20-30 minutes of kneeling down, bending, and getting into awkward positions, it starts to hurt. It starts to feel uncomfortable. And it's not because you've damaged the body. You've simply asked it to do something that it's not used to doing. That pain is there as a little bit of a warning signal to tell you, we're not prepared for this, we're not quite able to do loads of this, so take it easy and don't push it. This is all about your system trying to predict and avoid any potential injury. Again, pain is looking after you. And this is the type of pain that physios, osteos, chiros, personal trainers all focus on. I've got 2 physiotherapy degrees, and 99% of both of them was all about addressing mechanical pain. How can we optimize the physical system to make ourselves more capable and therefore overcoming mechanical pain? Every single thing on this page, whether it's mobility, yoga, stretches, Pilates, manipulation, strength, massage, everything here is about addressing mechanical pain. And I'm willing to bet that most of the things that you've done in order to fix your pain are on this list. They are things that are designed to improve your mechanical system, make your body more flexible, stronger, make it better able to cope with the physical demand of a task. But we cannot forget the 4th option. As I said, there are 4 reasons that we can experience pain. And this 4th option is the one that everyone forgets. It's the one that I was never even taught about in either of those degrees. And that is nervous system pain. Now, the moment you mention the brain and the nervous system, a lot of people just switch off. But as I said to you before, think like a scientist. Don't be led by your biases and emotions. Be curious, open-minded, and let's go through this together, because this isn't abstract. This isn't just theory. There is so much research and evidence and science that proves this type of pain. The problem is most people just don't want to hear it. They've already decided that their pain is coming from something mechanical, like their posture, and that means that they miss something super important here. And the sad thing is that can leave them stuck in pain for years, and I do not want that to happen to you. So before we go into this in any more detail, I want to take a moment to use the correct medical term. As I said, I want this to be science-backed and evidence-based. So the correct term for this is neuroplastic pain. It's simply referring to the way that your brain and nervous system, neuro, has adapted and changed, which is plastic. So I'm going to teach you all about this type of pain and tell you exactly how to figure out if it's the missing piece in your puzzle. But just before I do, I want to remind you the very first thing I said, which was our medical system makes a massive mistake. And this is the reason. The first 3 types of pain that I described, medical, damage, and mechanical, are all physical. And that is what our medical system is designed to address. You've got GPs, surgeons, osteos, physios, chiros, PTs, and plenty more, armed with blood tests, armed with physical tests, armed with x-rays and MRIs. Everyone is laser focused in on finding the physical cause for your pain. And think about it. Think about everyone that you've been to. What have they asked you about? What have they said to you? What tests have they done? What are they ultimately looking for? But that 4th type of pain that I mentioned, neuroplastic pain, absolutely nobody in our medical system has the job of diagnosing it or treating it. So no wonder that it flies completely under the radar. No wonder that people don't even think it's a real thing. Nobody in our system is even talking about it. And therefore you can be forgiven for thinking that this is a very small percentage, that most chronic pain fits into one of those first 3 categories. But some of the world's leading pain scientists would argue that neuroplastic pain actually makes up for about 80% of chronic pain cases that are outside of a medical problem. So, of course, you can have chronic pain that is a symptom of a chronic illness or disease, but in the absence of those medical problems, if we have someone with chronic knee pain or chronic back pain, a massive percentage of that group are experiencing their symptoms because of neuroplastic pain. Our medical system just isn't even looking for it. I spent the first few years of my career completely focused on those first 3 without even realizing neuroplastic pain was a thing. It was only when I learnt about it and just how common it is, and the process for diagnosing and fixing it, that I completely changed the entire trajectory of my career. But that's a story for another day. I want to kick off by telling you that there are two good things, well, great things about neuroplastic pain. The first is that it's easy to diagnose. The problem is no one's even looking for it. We just need to ask the right questions, and we're going to go through this process together in just a moment. The second good thing is that it's easy to treat. There is a proven protocol to fixing this pain, and it's far easier to do than fixing a complicated mechanical problem, or to go in and repair something with surgery and then deal with all of the post-op rehab. If someone's chronic pain is neuroplastic, this is a massive win because they can diagnose it and treat it far easier than any of the other options. So, before I tell you how to diagnose it and how to fix it, I've got to teach you what it actually is so that you know what you're looking for. So let's dive into it. This is how your brain functions at its most basic level. You've got two systems, your sensory system and your motor system, your information in and your information out. Something goes in, your brain decides what to do with that information, and then it decides what action to take. A simple example is you're sat at home and the doorbell rings. You hear the sound, your brain processes that sound and recognizes what that means. It knows that someone's at the door. So your brain tells your muscles to activate, that stand you up, walk you to the door so you can answer it. So if the brain receives a sensation, it has to process it and decide, what does this sensation mean? Ultimately, is it safe or is it dangerous? Because remember, the brain's number one priority is to help you survive. It's on the lookout for any danger signals that you need to be aware of. So the brain has to process, is any of that information coming in indicating danger? If not, if the brain thinks that that information is safe, nothing will happen. But if the brain thinks that that information coming in is dangerous, it will respond by generating pain. This process is exactly what's happening in all of our previous examples. When someone's having a heart attack, when someone's broken their ankle, when someone's been building that pesky IKEA cabinet for an hour, that sensation comes into the brain interprets that sensation as potentially dangerous, and then activates pain. But neuroplastic pain is a little bit different, and it's all to do with the way in which your brain is processing that incoming sensation. And it looks a little bit like this. You have a completely normal, safe sensation coming into the brain, but the brain misinterprets it. It makes a mistake. It ultimately thinks that there is some danger, when in fact, there isn't any. And the brain accidentally generates pain. But you may think that that's not really possible. You may think it's unlikely that the brain would make such a big mistake, that the brain doesn't get things wrong. Well, I'm going to show you otherwise, and to do so, I'm going to use two real-world examples for you to see just how common this actually is. The first is the phantom vibrate. We have all been there where our phone's been in our pocket and we felt that familiar vibrating sensation against our leg. You reach in and grab the phone expecting to see a message or a call, but nothing. You could swear on your life that you felt your phone vibrate, but apparently you didn't. And this is simply because your brain made a mistake. It picked up on a sensation and it made the mistake of assuming that it was that familiar sensation that it's learnt over time. Another example is the phantom voice. How many times have you been in a room with someone and either you've said or they've said, "Did you say something?" And you say, "No, I didn't say a thing at all. It was completely silent." But that person could swear that they heard their name. They could swear that they heard someone say something to them. And again, the brain has heard something and it's made a prediction. It's used everything it's previously learnt and experienced to process the incoming information. And in this moment, it's got it completely wrong. It's heard something and filled in the gap with what it thought was going to happen next. And the reason the brain does this is because it's a prediction machine. The brain uses everything that we've previously been through and experienced to decide how to deal with current situations. And this is especially true in dangerous situations. Your brain's learned through past experiences what danger looks like, what it feels like, and then it's constantly using those to scan your current moment to make sure that if danger appears, it can recognize it and keep you safe. But you may be thinking, how does this relate to pain? To help explain, I want to walk you through an incredible study that was done in Germany. What these researchers wanted to do was investigate the correlation between whiplash and belief. So they set up this really elaborate study where they had two cars and they sat the participant of the study in the driver's seat of the front car. Then they propelled the second car into the back of them. And then they monitored them over the coming month, asking them how they felt, had they got any pain, etc., etc. But what was incredible is that the entire study was a sham. The two cars never touched. The person sat in the driver's seat could see that second car heading towards them, But what they didn't realise is that second car was stopped just short. But to make sure that the whole thing was realistic, the researchers played a massive car crash sound on some speakers. They shook that front car by hand, and they even threw glass and debris onto the floor, so that as the participant was getting out of the car and walking away from the crash site, they believed that they'd been in a car accident. But I don't think they could have even imagined what happened next. 3 days after the initial crash, 20% of the group reported having head and or neck symptoms. But what was even crazier is that 5 people still had pain 1 month after a crash that never happened. They just believed that they'd been in a crash. Their brain was flooded with information to tell that brain, you've been in a car accident. And the brain predicted what to do next. And for those 5 people, it predicted pain. And I really want to emphasize the point here that these people suffered no injury. Their neck and head was as healthy as it was before this study took place. They were already experiencing chronic pain in a perfectly healthy part of the body, just because the brain had been tricked. So the definition of neuroplastic pain is when a safe signal is being misinterpreted by the brain as though it was dangerous. And another way that we could look at this is a false alarm. And at this point, I want to ask you a philosophical question. If your fire alarm were to go off at home or your office building, would you be able to tell whether it's a real fire or a false alarm based on the sound alone? No, of course not. The alarm is a constant. It sounds the same no matter what the trigger is. And this is also true of pain. You cannot tell where it's coming from based on how it feels. We need to look beyond that and figure out what the trigger is. And this is where people that you've seen have gone wrong. They've been focusing on the alarm without trying to figure out what is setting it off in the first place. At this point, I often get asked the exact same question, which is, okay, I understand how the alarm could get triggered, but it's been going on for months or years now. Why hasn't the brain and nervous system figured out that they got it wrong? Why hasn't the alarm just stopped going off? Why am I stuck in this pain? And this is an incredibly important question, but it also has an incredibly important and detailed answer. And with my one-on-one clients, answering this question is an entire video in my program. The simple explanation is that in our system, we have something called a fear-pain cycle. Pain increases the level of fear that we feel. That's the point of pain. It's designed to make you sit up and take notice. The problem is, fear then increases how sensitive your system is, allowing that alarm to go off even more easily. But when that alarm goes off again, you feel even more concerned, more worried, more frustrated. And the more fear you feel, the more sensitive the alarm becomes. And this negative spiral between the two evolve. And you can probably see this in yourself. What's the first thing you feel when you experience your pain? I highly doubt that it's a positive emotion. Think of that study that we mentioned with the car crash. What did they do to the participants? They put them in a state of fear. How would you feel being put in the driver's seat of a car and being told that they're going to propel another car into the back of you at high speed? Worried. Afraid. I would be. But simply having that fear enabled that pain-fear cycle to get rolling. And that allowed that pain to still be there 1 month later. But as I say, this is a big, big topic. And if it's something that you do want to know more about, just leave something in the comments. Because right now, I want to get into the massive question, which is how to diagnose it. How do we know that your pain is neuroplastic, rather than mechanical or damage-related or medical? Unfortunately, it's not something that we can look for with a scan or we can run a test. It is all about asking very particular questions to figure out, is your nervous system playing a role in how the pain began, how it behaves, and how it's responding? So we're going to run through 8 criteria together and make a note of any that apply to you. The first is that the pain can have an unpredictable pattern. Something can feel absolutely fine one day and then painful the next without really any rhyme or reason. And if you've ever found yourself asking the question or saying to yourself, this pain just doesn't make any sense, you would tick this box. The second is that the pain can move, spread, or jump around. You may not feel it in exactly the same place. Now, I've worked with people with neuroplastic pain where this definitely does not apply, but a lot of people will report that the pain will move around, or it might spread, or it could even just jump from one area to another, seemingly at random. The third is that the pain began and is continuing without a clear injury. Now, some people experience neuroplastic pain after an injury, so they might break their ankle, but then 2 years later still experiencing pain long after the original injury has healed. Other people will experience neuroplastic pain that just simply begins completely out of the blue. And this is even more important for you if the pain also began around the same time as a stressful, challenging, difficult life event. So if your pain began without an injury around the same time as something stressful, that would be a huge indicator that your pain is neuroplastic. The fourth is that you can experience pain or symptoms in multiple areas of the body. It's highly unlikely that you will have an injured knee, hip, back, and shoulder all at the same time. It's far more likely that you'll have one single cause. And what's one thing that talks to every single part of our system? The brain and the nervous system. And often people will report this feeling that they're just chasing the pain around the body. The pain's in one area, they do some treatment, and then it just appears in another. And it feels a little bit like whack-a-mole. If that's you, the reason isn't because you're shifting this problem around your mechanical system. The real answer lies in your nervous system. Number 5 is that the pain is made worse by worry or stress. If you're feeling worried or stressed about something, and you're noticing that that's increasing your symptoms, that tells us straight away that the nervous system and your pain are connected. And I want to help you to avoid a common trap that I see a lot of people fall into, and that's where they decide that their pain can't be neuroplastic because this one doesn't apply to them. Just because worry or stress has not made your pain worse does not rule out neuroplastic pain as a potential cause. I could talk about this one alone for so long, because there are so many nuances to it. But let's crack on with number 6, which is pain can disappear when doing something fun. Now, the pain doesn't have to disappear completely, and it doesn't have to happen every single time. But if you notice that when you're doing something distracting or engaging or fun, there's a significant improvement in your symptoms, then that's telling us that, again, your nervous system is involved. Number 7 is that medical imaging appears normal. And this is just ruling out damage as a potential cause. Now, you may have had x-rays, MRIs, ultrasounds, or all of the above, and they've come back normal, showing no clear reason for the pain that you feel. And I know that that can be a double-edged sword, right? You kind of want it to find something, you just don't want it to find something really awful and scary. But the problem is, often when a doctor says there's nothing wrong with the scan, that's kind of where the conversation ends. And that's again because they're just not looking for this type of pain. They're looking for damage, and if your pain doesn't fit into that category, then you need to go and see someone else. Again, a common trap that people fall into is anyone over the age of 16 or 18 is going to have things that come up on an MRI. I'm 33. There are plenty of things that you would find if you MRI'd my spine. By the time that we're 40, half of the population will have signs of disc degeneration in their spine. But that 50% of people will not have pain. We need to be smart and think, do the findings on MRI or X-ray correlate with the symptoms that you feel? We've got to treat imaging as a piece of the puzzle, not the completed picture. And the final one is that specialists can't explain what's wrong. As I said to you earlier, physios, GPs, surgeons, doctors, they are completely blinkered and are only looking for physical causes of pain. So if the problem isn't medical, if the problem isn't damage, and everything in your mechanical system looks good, often they're left kind of scratching their heads. And the most that you'll hear is, oh, it's probably just stress or anxiety, which is incredibly unfair and reductive. This isn't just a stress and anxiety problem. It's a genuine type of pain that's coming from our nervous system. And the solution isn't just being less stressed or being more calm. We need to train and rewire our nervous system, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Essentially, if specialists can't tell you what's wrong, that should immediately make you think, okay, what are they not looking for? Because the high likelihood is if they can't explain it, it's probably the thing that they're not considering, if that makes sense. And a point that I really want to stress is, you do not have to tick every single one of these criteria for the pain to be neuroplastic. And there's no real set amount that you need to have X number of ticks for it to be neuroplastic. But the more ticks we have, the greater the initial level of confidence. But for me, I've worked with someone who only ticked 2 of these criteria and then successfully worked to rewire their nervous system, break out of neuroplastic pain, and get back to the sport they love, despite loads and loads of other things not working. So the question that we're asking is your nervous system influencing the pain that you feel? Now, for you personally, it might be an absolute yes. It might be an absolute no, or it could be somewhere in between. But no matter what your answer is to this question, I want to help you figure out exactly what your next step should be. And to do that, we're going to use the analogy of fixing a phone. If your phone were to break tomorrow, that could be because there's a problem in the software or the hardware, and you may not know for sure which one it is. But what would be the most sensible way of getting that phone back up and running? Well, the first thing I would do is a big software update. I'd see if that managed to fix the problem. And that's ultimately what every tech store will tell you to do if you take in your phone. They'll get you to upgrade the software and see if that fixes the problem. And that's because the software controls the hardware. It's completely pointless to replace and fix all of the hardware if all of that stuff is working absolutely fine, and it's because the software isn't using everything properly. If it's completely fixed the phone, awesome, great, go back to using it. But now, if it's not completely fixed the phone, you know exactly what bits of hardware you need to target. If the software update completely fixes the camera, great, that's fine. But if it doesn't fix the volume button on the side, well, you know exactly what you need to replace. It makes your job of fixing the hardware so much more focused and efficient. And that's exactly how we need to address your pain. If you said yes to any of those questions, then the nervous system is influencing your pain. And the first thing that we need to do is update the software. We need to make sure that the nervous system is working optimally, and then upgrade the hardware. Now, most of my clients, once we update the software, that completely resolves their pain. And the hardware bit isn't about overcoming pain or improving posture or balance. It's about getting them ready to get back to the sport they love. But the problem is, everything you've done so far has focused on this, and you've dived straight into replacing and upgrading the hardware. And there's a reason why all of those things have not worked. And the high likelihood is that there's a software problem underneath. You've upgraded all of the hardware, but you haven't done a software update. Now, I know it is super simplistic to just say, update the software and that's going to eliminate all of your pain. But this video is all about understanding what neuroplastic pain is and how to diagnose it. And in future videos, we'll go through what upgrading the software actually entails. So I just want to recap. Pain is always there for a reason, and we can experience pain for one of 4 reasons. The most common and most ignored is the nervous system. We look for that using all of the criteria that we went through. And if those apply, the nervous system has to be addressed to fix your pain. So what are your next steps? Underneath this video, I'm going to leave a bunch of links giving you everything that I can think of to help. You'll find a PDF that breaks down those criteria that we discussed in far more detail, so you can be really confident how many apply to you. I'll also leave a link that tells you all about my one-on-one 12-week coaching program. You can see the exact steps that I take to help my athletes overcome neuroplastic pain and get back to the sport they love. And that page also includes a bunch of testimonials to give you a client perspective. And the final thing is I'll leave a link to book a completely free one-on-one call with me. That could be to discuss this all in more detail and figure out if your pain really is neuroplastic. But it's also the very first thing to do if you want to join my 12-week coaching program. I want to make sure that that program is absolutely right for you, and the best way we can do that is to have a chat and discuss it together. And lastly, if you found this at all helpful, feel free to like and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any future videos that talk about this journey from chronic pain back to sport. I'll see you in the next one.